Greetings, non-feminist men and women of the world. Today is Monday, July 20, 2015. Welcome to episode number 56 of the Vanguard Report. This is where we talk back to feminism. Have you ever noticed that feminists think they have a right to tell us what feminism is? Have you noticed that? It's an odd little quirk of theirs. It's like they think the rest of the world has no eyes or something, or no ears. It's like they think we're all idiots or something. And not only do they tell the rest of the world what feminism is, they tell the rest of the world what the world is, too. It's as if they have a monopoly on reality or something. Strange, man. Really strange. They're telling us what we are and telling us what makes us tick. And for the most part, we sit there and take it like a bunch of good little chumps. Now, if your next door neighbor or some random stranger treated you that way, would you sit there and take it? Well, I hope not. You would take offense, wouldn't you? So, when a group of random strangers who happen to call themselves feminists behave the same way toward billions of people they have never
Fetal Bogan, you cut out there, buddy. Can you try coming back for us? See if you can straighten out that audio issue there. We will wait. Yep. And we are waiting. Sorry about this, folks. Every once in a while we do have technical difficulties. We are going to try to get Fetal Bogan back as soon as possible. Okay, well, good news, folks. It was only a browser crash. So, Fetal Bogan will be back shortly.
Hello, I'm back. I think I'm back.
Yep, you are back. We hear you just fine, man. Go ahead and continue on.
My browser crashed. I hate it when that happens. It's the first time it's ever happened on the program.
We are getting a little odd beeping sound coming from you, though.
I have no idea where that odd beeping sound is coming from. No idea. Well, hopefully it's not overwhelming.
Oh, there it goes. It just went away.
Okay. Well, what happened is I turned off the video. The video was on. I turned it off, and the beeping went away. So we're all good. Okay. Oh, I lost my train of thought. I lost everything. Where was I at? I was in the middle of my opening monologue.
Yeah, you were talking about how feminists
I'm not going to read the whole thing again from the top since I already said it. So let's see where I left off. Oh, I wouldn't mind doing that, but okay, I'll start right here. If I overlap a little bit, I overlap a little bit. If your next door neighbor or some random stranger treated you that way, meaning telling you what you are and telling the world all about how you think and what you think and what makes you tick and all that. If some random stranger or your next door neighbor treated you that way, would you sit there and take it? I certainly hope not. You would take offense, wouldn't you? I think you would. So, when a group of random strangers who happen to call themselves feminists behave the same way toward billions of people they have never even met, let alone consulted with, the case is no different. And we're talking about the non-feminist majority here because we are the majority. Now, feminist behavior is not simply offensive, although that word is, I mean, it's been practically been killed. Okay, I hear that word and I want to laugh. But no, their behavior is simply, here's a better word, their behavior is simply intolerable. And like anything else intolerable, we should not tolerate it. We should not tolerate it. What the hell makes feminists think they have the final word on what feminism is? In their own minds, do they mean? And what the hell makes them think they have the final word on what we, the rest of the world, the non-feminist majority, are? Have they ever really met us? Have they ever really talked to us? Have they ever really listened to us? Have they ever gotten off their lazy asses and taken the time to find out what we're really all about? No, I think not. Why do they call us such terrible names? Simply because we refuse to join their cult? When will it finally dawn upon them that feminism is a product that must be sold like any other product? In other words, you must persuade your potential customers to buy your product. And for that, you must have a sales strategy. Well, the feminist sales strategy seems to be to insult and slander their potential customers if those customers refuse to buy, if those customers ask inconvenient questions about the product they are being asked to buy. So I leave it to you, dear listeners, to tell me if that is a wise sales strategy. If you ran a company and you were selling a product, would you send your sales representatives out there to insult your customers in order to talk them into buying your product? Is that how you would do it? I don't think I would. At least not if I wanted to stay in business. Hey, feminists, if you want to convert people to feminism, you must listen respectfully to their concerns and modify feminism accordingly. Remember, the customer is always right. So you need to use some feminist political hygiene and stop treating the rest of the world like dirt. We are your customers. We are your public. We're the people you have to get along with. Have you thought about that? So stop that cowardly, dishonest trick of sending us to the dictionary to learn the meaning of the word feminism. Never mind the word feminism. We're talking about the thing feminism, okay? The word is not the thing. That's basic semantics. I know a lot of you guys are college educated. You ought to know basic semantics. The word is not the thing. We can damn well see what feminism is with our own eyes, and we can hear it with our own ears. We don't need the dictionary to tell us that. So stop hiding behind the dictionary. The dictionary is not your shield. Bottom line, you must turn your product into something that pleases the people. That's me. I'm part of the people. You got to please me. And you got to please a whole lot of other people too. In fact, anybody who's not a feminist, you want to talk them into being a feminist, you got to please them. Don't insult their intelligence. Yes, I know this sounds harsh, but you'll just have to do a little bit of brown nosing if you want people to buy your feminist product. You'll just have to suck it up and suck up. That was a good one. Anyway, I am Theo Bogan, your host. My fellow host, Nick Redding, man of Canada, true son of the Alberta Prairie, and the force behind the Men's Rights Edmonton Project. He's not with us today. He is under the weather. He is indisposed. So we hope all goes well for Nick, and we wish him a speedy recovery from what ails him. In the meantime, you can always go to mensrightsedmonton.com. That is the website of the Men's Rights Edmonton Project. It's there on the big fine invention of Al Gore, the internet. There it is, mensrightsedmonton.com. Go there, take a look. And there's some contact information there on the website. And if you are in Edmonton or near Edmonton or going to be passing through Edmonton, or you know somebody who's in Edmonton, or any combination thereof, Nick would like to hang out with you, get together with you, talk with you. So there's contact information. Don't be afraid. Get a hold of Nick. If you are a non-feminist, a member of the activated non-feminist sector, a person who's fed up to their back teeth, up to their ears with feminism, well, I think you'll find Nick to be pretty good company. And he's there in Edmonton, so get a hold of Nick. That's what he always says, and today I'm going to say it for him. All right, now let's move on into the program. Hey, what about that New Horizons space mission? You know, the one going to Pluto? Well, the flyby happened on July 14th. That was just, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. Well, 6 days ago, actually. July 14th, 2014. That was the date when the New Horizons spacecraft made its closest approach to Pluto. It's been taking photographs all along, traveling at 1,000,000 miles an hour, not an hour, I'm sorry, 1,000,000 miles a day. And we've been seeing Pluto getting closer and closer and closer. And now we are seeing historical firsts here. We are seeing the planetoid Pluto, the planetary-like object Pluto, whatever you want to call it, close up for the first time, instead of being a little blur in the Hubble scope. Now it's becoming a real round globular world. It's a place. It's got lights and shadows and dimensions and everything else. There's going to be more photographs coming through, high-resolution photographs, but they've got a few up there already. Those pictures, they are spectacular, showing some of the weird topography on that remote world. 11,000-foot mountains of solid ice. You know, Pluto gets as cold as 387 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Woo, man. For comparison, absolute zero is 459 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Now, at Pluto temperature, which is 387 below zero, your body would freeze instantly, and if somebody smacked you with a hammer, you would shatter into pieces. And that's not even absolute zero. Anyway, New Horizons has completed its flyby and flown beyond Pluto and is plunging into the Kuiper Belt at the speed of 1 million miles per day. The Kuiper Belt, that's the big cosmic junkyard out on the fringes of the solar system, full of rocks and rubble and comet material and so on. It's like a asteroid belt times a zillion. New Horizons is speeding on its way at 1 million miles a day. Man, that's fast. Soon it will be lost completely to the void of interstellar space. But if it were heading in the direction of Alpha Centauri, it would arrive in approximately 240 years at the rate it's going, since it is traveling at approximately 1/360th the speed of light. Fascinating trivia for you. I just wanted to share all this, even though it has no relevance to what we normally talk about here on the program. But I just think it's cool, so I wanted to share it. Everybody look up Pluto images, Google up Pluto images, and you'll find plenty of places where you can go look at those marvelous pictures they got. And there's a bunch of them now, and there will be more. Anyway, on this episode, number 56 of the Vanguard Report, we will be discussing a lot of university-related stuff in terms of the links that we'll be sharing and fisking. My browser crashed a few minutes ago, and I had all the links up in browser tabs, and now the browser tabs are gone, and I'm going to have to reload these things by cutting and pasting into new browser tabs. So this is not going to go quite as fast as I would like, as I would normally do. Bear with me here. First, I got to bring up my browser. Hopefully the damn thing doesn't crash again. All right. Here we go. It's coming up, and there it is. There it is. This is from the WashingtonExaminer.com. Judge rules campus kangaroo court unfair. This is all about the rape epidemic on college campuses in the USA. You know, women are just getting raped everywhere, left, right, and center. Boy, there's a rapist hiding behind every bush there, or at every fraternity party. No woman is safe. 1 in 5 women get raped, brutally raped, like straw dogs raped while they are in college. So, judge rules campus kangaroo court unfair. A California judge just issued a win to proponents of due process in campus sexual assault hearings. Judge Joel M. Pressman deemed a University of California San Diego campus hearing unfair, ruling that the hearing panel limited the accused student's right to due process. The accused student, listed as John Doe, had sued the university after being suspended for sexual assault without due process. See? Due process, that's a very important concept in our civilization, in our legal system, in our criminal justice system. Very important thing. It's kind of basic that everybody who is dragged into the court system on charges is entitled to due process. But wait, on campus, they slip through the loophole because, after all, this is under institutional jurisdictions and it's not technically a court of law that the student is being dragged through. That's how they get away with it, basically, in a nutshell. So, the accused student, listed as John Doe, had sued the university after being suspended for sexual assault without due process. John claimed that his right to cross-examine his accuser and adverse witnesses was limited, and Pressman agreed. See, there's all kinds of things you cannot do that you would normally have a right to do under law, but you cannot do if you're hauled into a campus kangaroo court on rape charges if you're male. I haven't heard about this happening to women yet. John was only allowed to submit questions to the hearing panel to be asked of his accuser. In other words, he wrote down a list of questions and gave it to the people who were listening, the quasi-jury, I guess you would call them. His accuser, named in the lawsuit as Jane Roe. Of the 32 questions submitted, boy, he was doing some thinking there, wasn't he? 32 questions submitted by John, only 9 were asked, and only after the questions were reviewed by the hearing chair. In other words, John Doe didn't have a voice. He was gagged. The court determines that it is unfair to petitioner that his questions were reviewed by the panel chair for her alone to determine whether or not the question would be asked and then answered by the witness. Boy, wouldn't every criminal who gets hauled into court on some criminal charge love to be able to do that, to be able to control the people that might cross-examine him or her. No, you couldn't do that. But in a campus kangaroo court, yeah, you can do that. The court determines that it is unfair to petitioner that his questions were reviewed by the panel chair for her alone to determine whether or not the question would be asked and then answered by the witness, Pressman wrote. While the court understands the need to prevent additional trauma to potential victims of sexual abuse, this can be achieved in a less restrictive manner. The limiting of the questions in this case curtailed the right of confrontation, crucial to any definition of a fair hearing. Well, this is an institutional kangaroo court. It is not a court of law. That's how they can get away with it. This has political implications, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. Pressman noted that 7 questions not asked by the panel chair dealt with text messages between John and Jane. The panel chair also paraphrased a question regarding John and Jane's relationship after the alleged sexual assault and allowed Jane to claim that their post-encounter relationship was not relevant. Their post-encounter relationship was not relevant. This, I don't know when this happened, if it was pre-Emma Sulkowicz, aka Mattress Girl, or post, but certainly the post-encounter relationship in the Mattress Girl case was quite material, as we know, if you followed that case at all. But here, apparently, they could not pull that into evidence. Allowed Jane to claim that their post-encounter relationship was not relevant. Further, Jane's questions were not given the same prior review as John's. So look at this. Everything is slanted against the defendant in this kangaroo court because it is not a real court of law. Although the power of this kangaroo court has, shall we say, implications that are on the same scale with those of a court of law, as far as wrecking a person's life. Pressman also decried the school disallowing John to cross-examine and question the only evidence at his hearing beside the accuser's story. Submitted to the hearing panel was an investigative report conducted by Elena Acevedo Dalcourt, the school's complaint resolution officer. An investigative report. Okay, I presume that Elena Acevedo Dalcourt talked to Jane Roe and then wrote up a report. That would be my guess. But Dalcourt did not attend the hearing, which prevented John from questioning her of the incident. Boy, doesn't this whole thing stink to the high heavens? But no, men are not oppressed. No, there is no such thing as sexism against men. Any feminist will tell you this. No such thing as misandry. Men really have nothing to complain about. Right, so just shut up. That's why I am not a men's rights activist. I'm not out here stumping for men. I'm out here just to go after feminism. I'm just out to get feminism. Men's rights, well, that can come later. All right, the panel relied on evidence that was outside the hearing. Ms. Dalcourt did not testify. While the technical rule of hearsay is not applicable to the hearing did not allow petitioner any opportunity to refute Ms. Dalcourt's findings, Pressman wrote. Ms. Dalcourt's conclusions were crucial to the findings, but petitioner was denied his right of confrontation. Well, in this institutional kangaroo court, he doesn't have a right of confrontation. This is a very interesting case. Okay, there's important legal history being made here, and this is in California. And if you know anything about California, what happens in California has a way of dominoing its way into other states of the Union. They call California the bellwether state. John was also not provided all of the evidence against him that was found in Dalcourt's report. He was not given the names of the witnesses interviewed by Dalcourt or all of Jane's statements prior to the hearing. Everything was loaded against the poor guy. They were setting him up for defeat. They wanted to screw the poor guy, and the whole system was designed on purpose to screw the defendant. Tell me it ain't so. Pressman reminded the university that it was the panel's responsibility to determine whether it was more likely than not that petitioner violated the policy and not defer to an investigator who was not even present to testify at the hearing. In a real court, defendants are allowed to exercise their Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination. See? But this is not a real court. In campus courts, students who don't give statements to investigating administrators often have their silence used against them, as was the case with Doe. So this is a parallel universe where normal rights of citizenship are suspended for men who get accused of rape. Does anybody see what the problem is here? Is there any moral idiot out there who doesn't see what the problem is here? I would assume that that person, that moral idiot in question, is a feminist. I don't hide what I think of feminism, and I am proud to say I am not a feminist. And I wish more feminists were proud to call themselves feminists, but a lot of them seem to want to hide it. Anyway, but that's beside the point here. While John stated during the hearing that he did not digitally penetrate Jane's vagina, he abstained from providing additional information regarding the incident and what occurred around the time of the incident, and the panel would have liked to hear more information from him, the hearing panel wrote in its findings. Pressman goes on to detail the lack of evidence to support the university's finding of guilt. Specifically, he explained that Jane did not object to sexual contact per se, and only explained that it was not pleasurable for her at that time. Jane also admitted during the hearing that she voluntarily consented to John later in the day of the alleged incident. This is looking shadier and shadier and shonkier by the minute. When viewed as part of the entire narrative, the sequence of the events do not demonstrate non-consensual behavior, Pressman wrote. And this is the California judge that is making the ruling, talking here. What the evidence does show is Ms. Rowe's personal regret for engaging in sexual activity beyond her boundaries. Well, there you go, regret rape. Pressman quoted from the hearing panel's findings. Jane stated that she physically wanted to have sex with the accused, but mentally wouldn't. It's like the flesh was willing, but the spirit was weak, or something like that. I don't know. This reservation, Pressman wrote, should not be seen as John's fault. This reservation, Pressman wrote, should not be seen as John's fault. I agree. I agree with Judge Pressman. It should not be seen as John's fault, particularly if she is indicating physically that she wants to have sex. This was a very, very mixed up young woman, sounds to me like. Beyond the unfairness of John's hearing, Pressman lambasted the university for continuously increasing John's punishment without any explanation. Upon the finding of responsibility, John was first sanctioned to a 1-month suspension and required to attend sexual harassment training and counseling. That's where they train and counsel you to not be a sexual harasser. Okay. He was also told never to contact Jane again, quote, due to the potential for ongoing harm to the complaining witness. After John appealed the ruling, his sanctions were increased to a 1-year suspension, meaning he would have to reapply to the university, put on non-academic probation, and required to attend ethics workshops on top of the original sanctions. You know, it sounds to me like the whole university there needs to attend an ethics workshop. I see nothing ethical about the way John Doe is being treated here. Somebody needs to cram the shoe on the other foot, and if it fits, make them wear it. Where is the ethics in the way this young man was treated? I'm in a boiling rage right now, let me tell you. I hardly know myself. When John appealed that decision, his sanctions were increased yet again to a 1-year and 1/4 suspension. He appealed the decision. First, he appealed the decision. They slapped him with more punishments. He appealed that, and they slapped him with more punishments. It was like a fist fight. And they were winning. When John appealed that decision, his sanctions were increased yet again to a 1-year and 1/4 suspension. None of the additional sanctions were given any explanation. Well, of course not. They don't need to explain anything. Yeah, you know, they're all feminists in there, in that school administration. Well, if they are, they better come out and say it. If they're not, they better come out and say that. In another recent court ruling on campus sexual assault, a judge, I guess someplace other than California, I don't know, a judge found that since the school followed its own policies, it was not guilty of violating a student's due process rights. Now, of course, under the school's own policies, the student virtually has no due process rights. So yeah, that is a consistent thing to say. Judge Pressman argues differently, that since the policy was unfair, so was the finding. John Doe's attorney, Mark Hathaway, released a statement following the judge's ruling last week. Mark Hathaway's statement, it's encouraging to see courts recognizing that sexual misconduct complaints on campus cannot be resolved at the expense of constitutional rights and fundamental fairness, Hathaway wrote. Colleges and universities must treat all students fairly, regardless of gender. All too often, the male student is just presumed responsible and given no access to any campus resources. Hopefully, Judge Pressman's ruling today will help correct the imbalance. Let me read something again. All too often, the male student is just presumed responsible and given no access to any campus resources. Well, there you have it. That's a microcosm for the male situation. Just adapt that statement slightly to a wealth of different situations, and you have, an existential map of what men are dealing with in our society today. Now, I'm not saying that to make the case for men's rights. I'm just saying that because, well, Joe Friday, I'm giving you the facts, okay? Just the facts. This is what's happening. You know, we need all of the objective reality we can get. And objectively, I would say that the way males as a class are being treated is despicable and shameful. And just putting that idea in your head. I'm not trying to do anything about it. I'm just planting that seed in your mind. You don't have to do anything about it, or although you're free to do something about it if you think you can do something about it. But all I'm doing is planting that seed in your mind, spreading this information. Because this war we're fighting is all about information, propaganda, and public rhetoric. I'm just sharing information. And you make your own conclusion. Do you think that males as a class are being shafted in today's world, especially after hearing this article that I'm just reading? And when you realize that what's happening on the campus is emblematic and microcosm of what's being done to men as a class all across society. Now, look away from university campuses and just look all over the place and see what's being done to males as a class and seeing the way things are just tilted against men in the culture. And yet we have these people who call themselves feminists who like to tell us that men are not oppressed. You know, men have nothing to whine about. All right, well, if that's what the feminists think, if that's their opinion, fine, fine. They have a right to their opinion. And hey, I'm not looking out for men's rights. I'm not advocating for men's rights. I don't give a rip about men's rights. I am just explaining the objective situation to anybody who cares to look. And to my mind, just as a philosopher of the human situation, as an independent, rational thinker, I think that's what's happening is a shameful, shameful, despicable outrage. And I say that not as a man, I say that as a human being who just selfishly wants to live in a healthy world. Because if the world is unhealthy in general, what's it going to do to my health? All right, let's finish up the article here. I think we're pretty close to the end. Advocates for due process have been issued a couple have been issued a couple of adverse decisions earlier this year when it came to campus sexual assault. And although John Doe received some justice in this case, there are dozens more accused students waiting for court rulings, and even more than that, who don't have the resources to hire an attorney and fight their schools. Yeah, unlike the Duke lacrosse lads, they had resources to hire an attorney and fight their schools. Just think if the Duke lacrosse lads didn't have all their advantage. They were from upper middle class backgrounds. A lot of men out there are not so lucky on campus or off. Judge Pressman's ruling should serve as an example to schools and the federal government as they continue to push Kafkaesque campus hearings that deny due process and promote a guilty until proven innocent standard. Damn. Wasn't John Doe just like Joseph K. in what he went through there? Makes me want to go back and read Kafka again. That's the end of that. End of the article. I think I've ranted about enough on this particular article. And, well, all I've got to say is let's just hope for a domino effect. This has happened in California. It's popped up in California. Let's just keep our eyes peeled and wait for it to start popping up in other states all across the USA. It's a good sign. It's happy news. I like it. Now let's move along to another university-related story. And let me dig this up. Let me dig this up from my cue list here and paste it into the browser, because I got to do that because my browser crashed a little while ago. There we go. That loaded right up. For immediate release, FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Missouri governor signs law banning campus free speech zones. Now, you just look at that title, it sounds like he's banning free speech, like there's free speech zones, and he banned the free speech zone. Sounds like he's getting rid of free speech on campus. But no, that's not what's happening. So let's dig into this. Jefferson City, Missouri, July 15, 2015. Yesterday, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon signed into law Senate Bill 93, the Campus Free Expression Act, or CAFE Act. And that's a familiar acronym there, CAFE. Hello, Dan Parents. CAFE. The Campus Free Expression Act, CAFE Act, which prohibits public colleges and universities from restricting student speech to tiny, out-of-the-way free speech zones. And some of those tiny, out-of-the-way free speech zones they've got on college campuses are pretty outrageous. It's like a little patch of ground next to a remote parking lot, 20 feet wide by 20 feet long. It's something on that order. That's the kind of free speech zones they will typically have on college campuses. It basically puts an end to free speech. It so limits the possibility of free speech that effectively there is none. If it's not free speech, well, it's highly expensive speech. I mean, they've made free speech very expensive, put it that way. Okay? The Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, worked with members of the legislature to ensure this important piece of legislation became law. 1 in 6 public colleges in the United States use free speech zones to restrict student speech, said FIRE Legislative and Policy Director Joe Cohn. Thanks to the CAFE Act and to all of those who fought so hard to get it passed, Missouri is now the second state to statutorily ensure that its public colleges and universities will no longer be among them. The CAFE Act was championed by sponsors Senator Ed Emery, Representative Rick Bratton, Representative Mike Moon, and Representative Mike Lair, chairman of the House Select Committee on Education. The bill also enjoyed the support of organizations from across the political and ideological spectrum. Wow, across the spectrum, you say, including the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Family Research Council, and the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri. The good old ACLU. Now, I know that organization has gotten a mixed report card, but I still think they do a lot of good. With overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate, the CAFE Act was passed by a unanimous 34-0 vote. 34 unanimous. I wonder why all of those politicians were unanimous behind this. Were they hearing from their constituents, I wonder? It passed the House of Representatives in the legislative session's final hours on May 15 and was signed by Governor Nixon yesterday. Missouri and Virginia are now the only states with statutes that prevent public colleges from limiting expressive activities through overly restrictive free speech zones on their campuses. Virginia's legislation was also supported by FIRE and was signed into law just last year. FIRE will continue to work with state legislatures to make sure student rights are protected. Opening up campuses for free speech is an important step toward ensuring that colleges and universities continue to produce the robust debates and discussions necessary for learning, said FIRE Executive Director Robert Shibley. Every state should follow Virginia and Missouri's lead and pass a CAFE Act, and FIRE stands ready to help them do so. Flamethrowers in hand. FIRE is available to work with Missouri's public colleges and universities to eliminate unlawful restrictions on free speech in order to achieve compliance with the new law. Administrators may contact FIRE for free assistance in keeping with FIRE's charitable mission. FIRE is a nonprofit educational foundation that unites civil rights and civil liberties leaders scholars, journalists, and public intellectuals from across the political and ideological spectrum on behalf of individual rights, due process, freedom of expression, academic freedom, and rights of conscience at our nation's colleges and universities. FIRE's efforts to preserve liberty on campuses across America are described at the fire, one word, thefire.org. Well, now, and that's the end of the article. There's some contact information following the article with phone numbers and email addresses. And this political spectrum they talk about there evidently does not include the authoritarian left, which is what I prefer to call social justice warriors, politically correct, progressive, that whole tribe right there. I just lump them all together under the moniker of the authoritarian left. It saves syllables, rolls off the tongue smoothly. So great. This is happy news. Freedom of speech. If there's one thing feminism does not approve of, it's freedom of speech. You can speak freely as long as you speak in praise of feminism. Otherwise, your speech is going to cost you. But here we see somebody chipping away at that Berlin Wall. And boy, it does my heart good. So, that's two nice pieces of news we've shared pertaining to university, higher education. There's the judge's ruling in California regarding the campus rape kangaroo courts, and then there is this thing about the free speech zones. So I guess if you're a college student in Virginia or Missouri, you can speak freely anywhere on any college campus you might be attending. They can't tell you to go to a 10 square foot plot of ground somewhere where you can speak your mind. That's nice. Let's move along. We got something else here. Bear with me as I cut and paste and pull this up. Cue number 3. Oh, wait a minute. Was I going to read that, or was I going to go into another speech and then get back to the links later? Let me check and see what I had on tap for the episode here. Oh, no. Now is time for another philosophical political discussion. Then we'll get back to talking about news items again. Calling all anti-feminists in every scene, sector, cultural community, tribe, industry, nation, neighborhood, political formation, etc. And by the way, if you're a non-feminist, you are politically, in effect, also an anti-feminist. Just for convenience, say that an anti-feminist is a non-feminist in a hurry. A non-feminist is an anti-feminist waiting to happen. The seeds of anti-feminism are planted in the mind of any person who has effectively said no to feminism or made the statement, I am not a feminist. From there, it just heats up. You get into anti-territory. But the simple statement, I am not a feminist, puts your toe 1 inch over the line. You're there. But you can still just say you're a non-feminist, and you can still offer to live peacefully with feminists. And then the onus is upon them to live peacefully with you. So there is an advantage to simply labeling yourself a non-feminist, because that is a non-aggressor position. Anyway, that's a separate speech for a separate day. If you are not a feminist, and if you want to see feminism collapse into universal disrepute and social death, or as Nick Redding would say, if you want to see feminism fall into the same disrepute as racism, then you, my friend, are one of us. And we are the majority, you know. So we need to form a system of combined operations. This ought to be based upon the precept of think globally and act locally. That is, we try to change the little picture in our own backyard, but we've got a roving eye upon the whole wide world. And what we see with our roving eye gets taken into account and guides our policy for what we do in our own neck of the woods. So it's a nice little marriage there of micro and macro. Yes, thinking globally means that we should form a network of recognition and understanding which spans both geographical and cultural distance. Having done so, we will be in a position to coordinate operations on a global scale. We make ourselves known to each other by an informal system of hints, winks and nods, inside jokes, smoke signals, shout outs, random bulletins, esoteric references, etc., 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 to be propagated through popular culture, social media, or by other means. In time, this system will evolve and grow more and more sophisticated. Acting locally means that we should operate in a distributed, community-based manner which taps local expertise in the service of anti-feminist innovation. Remember, there was feminist innovation, and to undo feminist innovation, that is as we define it, not as feminism defines it, to undo or block or counteract feminist innovation, we have to put into effect some form of anti-feminist innovation. Innovation meaning the introduction of something new. Now, since the world is divided into cultural sectors, and since we have infiltrated many of these, meaning we activated non-feminists have infiltrated many of these, we will be in a position to reverse engineer what the feminists have done using their very own methods. Well, some of their methods at our discretion, and confronting them on the ground in micro theaters of operation. And what we haven't infiltrated yet, we will work on infiltrating. You want to see a good example of a local cultural sector rising up against feminist innovation? Okay, look no further than Gamergate. There you go. I don't expect every one of these little sectoral battles to be as dramatic as Gamergate. Some of them will be small and unheralded. But basically, this is the model we need to work from. That the world is divided into little local communities, zones of interest, cultures, subcultures, etc., etc., and that the incursions of feminism into these areas of existence will be fought in those local micro theaters of operation. For the immediate future, we should strive for a shared understanding of what feminism is. A lot of people out there don't like feminism, they're against feminism, and yet get those same people together and get them to agree on what feminism is. Are they all out to slay the same dragon? Well, that's an important question. We need to think about that. We need to make up our minds. We need to agree on what precisely we are fighting. This is what I call target consensus. It's no good if we can't agree to aim at the same target, if we can't agree to slay the same dragon. And what's worse, we run the risk of friendly fire scenarios. In fact, those friendly fire scenarios are happening all over the place. MGTOW, anybody? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Therefore, in order to generate a working consensus, all people who oppose feminism should agree upon the following points at a minimum. Here we go. Here is a list of points. And basically, if you're against feminism, you should agree that the following 6 points all describe feminism or all pertain to feminism. So that way we have a rough idea what we're talking about when we talk about feminism. Here we go with the list. 1, feminism is an aggressor power. Let that sink in. Feminism is an aggressor power. We didn't start the fire, they did. We didn't light it, we're just trying to fight it. Feminism is an aggressor power. 2, lying is a prevalent feminist behavior. And I think that may be the number one thing that turns people against feminism in such revulsion, is that feminists are such compulsive and incorrigible liars. That feminism is very simply an empire of lies. It is a huge, huge extended fabric of lies reaching into every corner of life and every corner of society and every corner of our culture. Lying is a prevalent feminist behavior. 3, feminism at its core is anti-male. Do I need to recap all of the reasons why, if feminism were not anti-male, it wouldn't amount to anything? It wouldn't even keep running. It wouldn't keep rolling. It would just disappear and go out of business. Anti-maleness, hatred of men, animosity toward men, disaffection toward men, depraved indifference to the well-being of men seems to be an objective fact about this thing we call feminism. And again, let me make very clear, I am not promoting men's rights. I am not preaching from the men's rights bandwagon here. I am simply a philosopher, a political analyst, just a person looking at the world and telling you what is real and what's happening. Feminism is very simply an anti-male phenomenon, and it cannot be understood in any other terms. Feminism is anti-male. 4, feminism's driving purpose is to increase female power with no stipulated endpoint. I mean, you hear feminists rattling on about empowering women. That is a recurring phrase in their lingo. They're always talking about that. We need to empower women. Even the United Nations talks about that, empowering women in Africa or something like that. They're always talking about empowering women, which just means increasing the power of women, giving women more power. Is that a noble thing? Is that a good thing? Well, I would say that is a double-edged knife thing. But certainly it needs some examination. We're entitled to ask, is it a good thing to empower women, or is it a bad thing? Simply putting the question without coming down on one side or the other, but just putting the question in a purely rhetorical manner, setting that question on the table, that in itself doesn't mean that you're anti-female. No, of course not. Although a feminist will try to say that that's what it means, but no, it doesn't mean that. In a free marketplace of ideas where people are able to speak their minds and debate the pros and cons of virtually anything, well, we're entitled to ask these questions. And yes, that applies to feminism, and that applies to the devil. Both feminists and the devil are free to make their case and speak their minds. And then others are free to come along and tell the devil and the feminists to go to hell. You know, free speech, free marketplace of ideas. We're not sending anybody to hell. We are just telling them to go there. because we think that's where they belong. Yeah, they can follow our advice or not follow it. I don't know. 5, feminism will never stop unless a non-feminist power stops it. Boy, I could just go on and write a whole book from that one little sentence right there. You can't stop feminism from within feminism, from inside of feminism. If you are a feminist, if you think like a feminist, if you accept on faith implicitly the feminist worldview, if you internalize the feminist paradigm, that's it. You're hooked. You're part of feminism. You're stuck to the flypaper. And anything, any effort to get outside of feminism by making use of feminism or by accepting the feminist standpoint in the first place is sheer futility. It's bound to failure. As a radical feminist, Audre Lorde once said, you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. So the only thing that will stop feminism, either intellectually or politically or any other way, is a force coming from a standpoint which is not feminist or not within feminism, which is morally, intellectually, politically, existentially, every other way you can think of outside the perimeter of feminism's intellectual and moral gravity well. Only a non-feminist power can ever stop feminism. And that's why we define ourselves as non-feminist, because we want to stop feminism. 6, any so-called feminism which does not fit this profile outlined in the previous points, any so-called feminism which does not fit this profile is not actually feminism. And here we see reflected the policy that we are taking over the language. We're taking charge of the word feminism itself. Basically, feminism is what we say it is. We are controlling the language. We're taking away that control from the feminists because they've controlled the language long enough. They've controlled the language for years and years, going back to the 1960s, which is basically the time frame I work with. They've been controlling the language, telling us what feminism is, telling us what pretty much everything is. And we're taking that power away from them. We are taking control of the language, taking control of the entire public conversation and the entire cultural narrative. We're taking it back. And that begins with the simple idea that feminism is what we say it is. And to read point number 6 again, any so-called feminism which does not fit this profile is not actually feminism. There we are putting a limited scope upon the word feminism. No more generating confusion about the nature of feminism by having so many dodgy different definitions of feminism floating around in the cultural atmosphere. We're going to narrow the frame down and we're going to drill down into this and we're going to nail Proteus to the mat. Any so-called feminism which does not fit the profile that we've given is not actually feminism. So there you have it. There is the 6 points. Anybody who claims to be against feminism, who wants to join in sacred political union against feminism, and to know what we are really fighting, well, those 6 points encompass at a very minimum the thing that we are fighting. Now, we could easily stretch this list to include 600 points instead of 6, but that would lead to endless bickering and hair splitting. On the other hand, if we provided no list at all, we would never get ourselves on the same page with each other, would we? You know, we'd be back where we started with the same problem we're trying to solve, that we're all talking about feminism and all we're doing is throwing this little word back and forth and not knowing what the word signifies. Well, it's important that words do signify something and that we should understand and have some basic agreement on what the word signifies. So we have opted for the sensible solution here. Disagreements, yeah, we shall always have. disagreements, but if we can disagree on the same page, you got that? We don't have to agree on everything, but we should at least disagree on the same page. Sometimes just disagreeing on the same page, hell man, just being on the same page in the first place, is enough to smooth things out so that you can function. If we can disagree on the same page, we'll get along well enough to move along. Next, I'd like to share a very short but important document. This is called the Universal Non-Feminist Credo. The first thing that I read to you, the 6 points, is just us agreeing on what defines feminism. What I'm about to read to you now, is something to define what it means to be not a feminist. So we're kind of covering the thing from both sides here. What is feminism and what is not feminism? And you put these two documents together, and you've got kind of a holistic thing going on here. The Universal Non-Feminist Credo. This is, of course, as I said, not the same as the list of agreement points on what is feminism, which I just shared. It's a simple statement of what it means to be not a feminist. So here goes. The Universal Non-Feminist Credo. A brief statement containing a set of core ideas that nearly any self-declared non-feminist would agree upon. The credo, given as follows, is meant to establish a baseline understanding and core unity among all people who oppose feminism. Okay, here's where the statement begins. The Universal Non-Feminist Credo. We have studied feminism and considered its implications in the context of human history. Having done so, we choose not to identify with feminism and not to be bound by it. Simply put, we conclude that feminism is not a preferred choice. As non-feminist, we occupy a critical standpoint independent of feminist presupposition. On the merit of our standpoint, we claim the authority to define feminism in independent terms by the light of independent study. In principle, feminism is what we say it is. The power to define feminism is not a sole feminist privilege. We shall uphold non-feminist autonomy, non-feminist alterity, and secure non-feminist existence against feminist imposition in whatever form this may arise. That's it. That is the Universal Non-Feminist Credo. It was short and sweet, wasn't it? In fact, I'm going to read it again. We have studied feminism and considered its implications in the context of human history. Having done so, we choose not to identify with feminism and not to be bound by it. Simply put, we conclude that feminism is not a preferred choice. As non-feminists, we occupy a critical standpoint independent of feminist presupposition. On the merit of our standpoint, we claim the authority to define feminism in independent terms by the light of independent study. In principle, feminism is what we say it is. The power to define feminism is not a sole feminist privilege. We shall uphold non-feminist autonomy and non-feminist alterity and secure non-feminist existence against feminist imposition in whatever form this may arise. That's it. That was the Universal Non-Feminist Credo, and before that, the 6 points defining feminism that anybody who wants to line up with the activated non-feminist sector really ought to agree upon. so that we're at least on the same map about what feminism is, even if we disagree on details. Anyhow, thank you for taking the time to reflect upon these words. And if you find them profitable, please share them. Sometime in the next week or two, I will post all of this material online somewhere and provide a link. I haven't done so yet. And now, let's go back and talk about some more goodies from the internet. Here's a little something from The Onion, the funny magazine, The Onion. Okay, I gotta load this up in my browser, so bear with me for 15 or 20 seconds, as long as it takes. I copy, I paste, I hit the enter button, and it loads up. Here we go. Well, that went pretty fast. Temple University receives anonymous donation to build center for discrediting rape allegations. I mean, we've talked about so much grim and serious stuff. It's time to take a little walk on the lighter side. This is funny, but it also makes you think. Temple University receives anonymous donation to build center for discrediting rape allegations. That's right, they want to have a new campus movement to discredit rape allegations. This is from The Onion. Philadelphia, stipulating that the funds be used for furthering the invalidation of sexual assault claims wherever they occur. An anonymous donation received Thursday by Temple University is reportedly intended to be used to build a center for discrediting rape allegations. The donor, who has chosen to withhold his identity, requested that his $30 million endowment go toward a facility dedicated to undermining accusations of sexual abuse, said Alumni Relations Representative Cheryl Walker, adding that an unsigned letter accompanying the sizable contribution specified that the center act as a campus-wide resource for damaging the reputation of rape victims, as well as a hub for research into methods of sowing doubt about sexual misconduct charges. This benefactor, who is clearly a very wealthy individual, made plain through his legal intermediary that all students, faculty, and alumni have access to the center, and that especially promising work into tearing apart rape allegations until the accuser herself becomes an object of ridicule, even if such discrediting occurs after the fact, could receive additional funding. Walker added that while $30 million was a significant amount of money, Temple had chosen to decline the funding and hoped it would not hear from the anonymous donor again. Boy, okay, that's the article. It was a short one. This is from The Onion. I'm almost tempted to think that this is a real story. Is it The Onion being tongue-in-cheek, being funny, or is that a real story? Did somebody actually call up Temple University and make that offer? It might be worth looking into. I haven't done so. You never know about The Onion. The Onion is an interesting publication. The Onion is like, how shall I say? It's like the court jester. Okay. The Onion can get away with making fun of people and things that other people couldn't get away with making fun of. You know, it's like the court jester can make jokes about anybody, whereas if some courtier makes a joke at the expense of some big prince, then the big prince is going to have the courtier's head. But the poor fool can get away with it because he's just the fool. And so I see The Onion in the media sort of playing the role of the court jester. You never know who The Onion is going to go after next. Although I have to say that their general leaning is more leftward, but sometimes they like to take a walk on the wild side. So, The Onion is always fun to read. And this thing I just read really raises some questions, in its ironic, winky tongue-in-cheek way. Thought you would enjoy that. I did. Let's move right along. What do we got next? Oh, another item from fire.org, something called The Secret Life of Safe Spaces. Another campus story. Give me a minute to get this up in my browser. Here we go. The Secret Life of Safe Spaces by Fire Intern, published on July 15, 2015. Brown University is encouraging student-led panels and workshops on hot-button issues to be, quote-unquote, safe spaces, where students are safe to convey ideas without judging or being judged. But ironically, the one thing truly unsafe in these spaces is free speech. Some recent examples of Brown's Safe Space Initiative include a panel about the experience of Asian Americans and a discussion on the effects of hookup culture on campuses. A safe space is intended to create an environment where everyone feels safe to share their ideas, allowing open discourse and meaningful discussion to take place. A safe space designation includes specific guidelines to be set forth in order to guide the discussion towards that open environment. Guidelines for the workshops include mottos like, "What's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here," and "Trust intent, name impact." The former is supposed to encourage people to share their thoughts without fear of judgment, allowing attendees to leave having heard new concepts. The latter means that when something potentially offensive is said, the listener should trust the intent of the speaker in that they didn't mean to be offensive, but they should name the impact the statements had on them. Now, in other words, I feel bad about something that you said, okay? In theory, these guidelines help ensure that productive discussion happens at these events and that everyone has a chance to make their voice heard. This is important because a discussion space where people feel free to share their ideas benefits everyone. Open discourse exposes participants to new beliefs that wouldn't have otherwise been shared if people were afraid to speak their minds. If these guidelines reliably led to these intended results, it would be easy to support them. It is hard to find fault with suggestions that steer a discussion toward open-mindedness and a freer exchange of ideas. However, when you look at how students are actually using these safe spaces, it becomes clear that the guidelines do not serve to further free speech in campus spaces. Now I'm thinking of those free speech zones again. Looks like some places they want to turn virtually the entire campus into a safe space. For example, the trust intent name impact guideline too easily has the effect of curbing speech, as anyone can claim offense at a statement that simply goes against their beliefs. Boy, don't we know people like that. This guideline allows students to blur the line between speech that actually offends and speech that differs in opinion. Well, of course, if your opinion is different from mine, you are wrong, and that offends me. Like you say, you're not a feminist. A lot of people, a lot of feminists anyway, find that offensive. They find it offensive when you say, "I am not a feminist." It's because you are wrong. It's because non-feminism is wrong think and feminism is right think. And there's no way, according to them, that a right-thinking person could possibly be anything other than a feminist. I'm not making this up. That's just how these people think. And that's why we call it the feminist problem. Moving along, where did I leave off here? The guideline allows students to blur the line between speech that actually offends and speech that differs in opinion. Students may be afraid of getting called out for being offensive when they offer opposing views, particularly dissenting or minority viewpoints on campus. Rather than a truly safe space for expression, we end up with an echo chamber where only non-objectionable ideas are shared, which means nothing is challenged and nothing is defended. Boy, doesn't that sound like the Soviet Union back in the good old days and a few similar places? That sounds like Cambodia in the golden age of Pol Pot. Would have been something like that, I think. In other cases, students are using safe spaces as an escape room to physically avoid hearing ideas they disagree with, as described in Judith Shulowitz's New York Times column In College and Hiding from Scary Ideas. As Shulowitz describes in her article, a student chose to leave a debate because she was feeling bombarded by a lot of viewpoints that really go against my dearly and closely held beliefs. Oh, stop right there. Does this sound like just about every feminist you've ever met when you say you're not a feminist, or when you actually put up an argument against feminism? Feminism wants to turn the entire world, all of planet Earth, into a feminist safe space. And they want to push the rest of us, I don't know, into outer space. Maybe we can just go hitch a ride on the New Horizons and go to Pluto, and Pluto will be our free speech zone, way out there on the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Is that what they want? Students are placing themselves in a bubble where they can be shielded from dissenting views which are unwelcome because they're emotionally or intellectually threatening. God forbid that we should ever encounter anything in all of our days that is emotionally or intellectually threatening. I think we should live in a perfectly safe world where nothing dangerous can possibly happen, and you don't even have the choice to choose a dangerous option anymore. That sounds like a very safe world to me. No, it doesn't. It sounds like a very dangerous world. But that's a philosophical discussion I'll get into some other time. Students who hide in safe spaces don't shape and strengthen their beliefs. Further, students who hide in the bubble of safe spaces are at a disadvantage after they graduate and enter the real world. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. Where there are no safe spaces where these students can escape to in order to avoid issues that make them uncomfortable. Because these students insulated themselves during college, they graduate without the skills necessary to handle difficult issues. No. So instead, they learn to make every issue difficult for other people. See, they just want to make the world nice and easy peasy for themselves, but they want to make it hard for the rest of us because they're too lazy to deal with the inherent perversity and complexity of existence. They want to slough their work off on everybody else and make us the bad guys into the bargain. These contradictions between the intent of the safe spaces and how they are used in practice mean one of two things are occurring on my campus. Either students are knowingly creating environments where free discourse is discouraged for the sake of protecting the feelings of the event attendees, or this is what they think the free exchange of ideas looks like. Yes, I'm going to say it's the latter as much as the former, if not more so. Each of these possibilities is a problem in its own way. In the case of the former, students are stifling speech in order to protect themselves from being offended. Students claim that safe spaces allow anyone to share their ideas without judgment, but in the same breath, choose to retreat to safe spaces where they can escape the threat of dissenting views. When students are unwilling to offer dissenting views out of fear of being called offensive, it hurts everyone. Stifled students are unfairly silenced, and the rest of the students are deprived of the opportunity to hear a new perspective. When students are actively avoiding listening to opposing ideas by retreating to safe spaces, there is no progress on campuses. Okay, no progress on campuses, uh, which is kind of funny considering that campuses are supposed to be the domain of progressive people. Am I right? On the other hand, if students are perpetuating these safe spaces, wait a minute, lost my place. On the other hand, if students are perpetuating these safe spaces under the guise of thinking this is what productive conversations look like, then students need to recognize the value of being exposed to dissenting views. So they think that the safe spaces where you can't hear certain things, they think that these spaces are bastions of free speech. Okay, interesting irony there. Meaningful discussions are not those in which everyone agrees with each other thoughtlessly, but where ideas are challenged. When ideas are successfully defended, personal beliefs are strengthened and progress takes place. Therefore, open and productive conversations must have a place on campus, requiring students to stop hiding behind the pretense of safe spaces and embrace true discourse. And there the article ends. You know, the thought just occurred to me that when the feminists tell you to go look in the dictionary to learn the meaning of feminism, they're basically creating an intellectual bubble or intellectual safe space in which any subsequent conversation is defined by the parameters set by the dictionary definition of feminism. They're creating an intellectual safe space, shielding themselves from the bombarding assault of non-feminist ideas and non-feminist critical perspectives. When you define the base ideas that define the discourse, you control the discourse and you have created an intellectual gravity well, in effect, an intellectual safe space. So all of feminism, all of feminist theory is simply an intellectual safe space strategy. It's just safe space uber alles. And the rest of us can go somewhere else, like Pluto. Okay, or maybe we can head for Alpha Centauri. I don't know. They don't want us on Earth. That much is clear. Well, that was an interesting article, and we've certainly talked about a lot of things happening on campuses. Let's turn to something else now. We've got a couple more items on the queue list. The next thing is queue number 5. I copy and I paste, and I will share this with you. This is from India, online publication, The Hindu. Looking at the graphics and layout of this website, this kind of looks like the New York Times of India. Anyway, and I mean that, basically as a compliment, okay? Domestic Violence Act prone to misuse, says High Court. The Madras High Court bench here has observed that Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 suffers from inherent flaws which tempt women to misuse their provisions and men to dread being prosecuted under the law without any rhyme or reason. Boy, oh boy, This Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, that is the Indian VAWA. That's it. That's the Indian VAWA. They got VAWA everywhere. And what they're describing in that short paragraph, doesn't that sound familiar? It sounds like, yes, VAWA and what we have to deal with in the United States, and what we have to deal with in Canada with their version of VAWA, and what we have to deal with in all these other Western countries with their various local versions of VAWA. Okay, so this disease is planetary. It's all over. I don't mean it's penetrated every single country on Earth quite yet, but it's spreading fast. It's not just in the West. It's in India. It's in, well, there's activism, counter-feminist activism going on in Korea, in China, in Latin America. Yeah, this is a global problem. The feminist problem is the problem of the entire human race. And let's unite globally, but we'll talk about that some other time. Discussing a writ petition, Justice S. Unpronounceable, well, I'll try to pronounce this anyway, Vaidyanathan, Justice S. Vaidyanathan said, the notable flaw in this law is that it lends itself to such easy misuse that women will find it hard to resist the temptation to teach a lesson to their male relatives and will file frivolous and false cases. Well, what the justice said there has got a bit of a local Indian flavor to it, but it doesn't sound so far off from VAWA, from things we know closer to home, does it? One can be certain that there is something sinister about a law when it intimidates and instills fear in innocent people. Is that the purpose of the law? To intimidate and instill fear into innocent people? I thought the purpose of the law was to intimidate and instill fear into guilty people. When a person who has not committed any crime begins to fear punishment under the provisions of a law, it will certainly create panic amidst men. In this case, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 in India. That's the law we're talking about. Hold on while I make my browser operate here. It's being a little bit cranky. Got to scroll. Okay, nowadays, filing cases under the Domestic Violence Act by women has become a common one. Therefore, a neutral and unprejudiced law is needed to protect the genuine victims of domestic violence, irrespective of their gender. Come on, don't say gender, say sex. Never mind. The judge also said that a similar trend of misuse was observed in the case of Section 498A, yes, the notorious 498A, a woman being subjected to cruelty by her husband or his relatives of the Indian Penal Code. It forced the Supreme Court to term such misuse as legal terrorism. And we covered this Indian Supreme Court pronouncement on 498A in an earlier episode of the Vanguard Report, I don't know, 30 episodes ago. It's hard to keep track. Insofar as the present writ petition was concerned, the judge said that the petitioner had filed the case with the objective of wreaking vengeance, they meant to say, wreaking vengeance against her father-in-law and pressurizing him to agree for a settlement in 2 criminal cases registered in connection with domestic disputes. The judge pointed out that the petitioner had lodged a complaint against her husband and in-laws, who had countered it with another case lodged against her and her parents. Subsequently, she came to know that her father-in-law, a government school teacher, was about to be promoted as headmaster. Hence, she made a representation to the Virudhunagar district educational officer to withhold the promotion since he was facing a criminal case, and filed the writ petition seeking a direction to the officer to dispose of her representation within a stipulated time. Holding that the petitioner had no right to seek such a direction to the employer of her father-in-law, the judge imposed a cost of looks like 5,000 rupees on her. The money was ordered to be paid to Chief Justice's Relief Fund and then used for rehabilitation of victims of multiple earthquakes that hit Nepal last month. That's the end of the article. So, not much more I can say about that, except this is a global, worldwide problem. Yes, even in India, it's a problem. Feminism is everywhere, and it's not going to stay the same. It's not going to get better. It's not going to stay the same. It's only going to get worse until we get some pushback going on. And right now, the best thing that I can think of to be done is we start speaking up and speaking out and rouse the entire culture, the entire society against feminism and put feminism on the defensive. And by doing all of this, we embolden people to go out and do things in the political arena as well. But you got to get the groundswell started from somewhere. And why not start it from the grassroots? Sounds democratic, wouldn't you say? Sounds like the voice of the people, wouldn't you say? Sounds good to me. Fighting a war of propaganda. And we are, what shall I say? We're slagging off feminism loud and straight. We're speaking against it. And if so many people in such numbers start speaking up and speaking out against feminism, there won't be a damn thing that the feminists can do about it other than grin and bear it or stick their fingers in their ears or crawl into a safe space. And I have something playing, some kind of an audio playing on this web page. I don't know if you can hear it, but I hate it when that happens. Sometimes you think you're hearing voices in your head. Okay, I just went to a different website. So much for that. Finally, last item on the queue list here is another story from India. Oh, where are we? This is queue number 6. This is about a rape lynching taking place in a different part of India, in eastern India. And let me get this up in my browser. Another rape accused lynched to death in Dimapur district. And I did a little bit of homework here. I looked up Dimapur. Dimapur is located in far eastern India, not far from the border of Myanmar. It's kind of not even culturally much like India. It's more like the Far East than India. It's that far east. Anyway, I got another audio playing on this page into my headphones, and I don't know how to shut the damn thing off. How do I do this? An ad for orange juice. I don't like to hear ads for orange juice when I'm trying to do a Vanguard report. Okay. Now, I'm not much of a person for trigger warnings, but if you go to visit this link, this queue number 6, be advised the picture you see there is not pretty. I got to put it in one word: blood mask. Okay. So, trigger warning for anybody who needs it. It is a ghastly picture. Here goes with the story. Kohima, a rape accused, succumbed to internal injuries after he was beaten up by a mob in Kekiho village under the Dansiripar police outpost in Dimapur district of Nagaland, police said today. The deceased, identified as Hussein Ali, age 35, allegedly confined a minor girl to his house and raped her, Additional Deputy Commissioner of Police Dimapur Shuka Kaketo said. The victim, a minor non-local girl residing at Kekiho village, had gone missing on July 11th. Villagers started searching for her and found her confined in a house by the accused at Lotavi village on July 14, Kaketo said. He said the minor girl was allegedly raped by the accused and agitated villagers beat him up. Village elders managed to rescue him and were taking him to Dansiripar police outpost when the accused succumbed to his injuries on the way. The victim girl is under treatment now. The body of the accused was found to have sustained bruises on the limbs and back with no external injuries on the face and head. Well, judging by the picture, that last statement is not true. Like I said, her face is a blood mask, solid red. Yeah, there's injuries on the face. Police registered separate cases of rape and murder. Two persons identified as Abdul Shahid and Hatim Mia have been arrested on charges of murder. On March 5th, a mob had gate crashed into Dimapur Central Jail and lynched a rape accused. There we go. That's the article. This is not the first article we've discussed on the Vanguard Report about rape lynching in India. It seems to be a pretty common thing in India for angry townspeople to gather into lynch mobs and deal lynch mob justice to somebody who has been accused of rape. Of course, I'm not taking sides here. I know nothing about this case. I don't know if the man who got killed actually committed a rape or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. However, I do find it rather distressing what the lynch mob did to this man. Didn't even give him benefit of due process. Remember that? Due process? A lot of people seem to have a problem with due process. This village mob in India very clearly had a problem with due process, just as a lot of feminists have a problem with due process, and especially on campuses. So, this whole thing is conceptually making a big circle. I think that the man should have been arrested and put in jail and properly put on trial. And if he was found guilty of rape, they should have dealt out the appropriate punishment. What happened to this man was monstrous. But I'm sure a feminist would only applaud. I've heard feminists say that rapists should all die. And I've noticed something else about feminists. They tend to get the accused and the word accused rapist and the word rapist mixed up in their minds very easily. Just as they get the word accuser and the word victim mixed up in their minds very easily. If you are accused of rape in the feminist mind, that's it. You are a rapist. And what happened in this village in India is just the extreme end of the spectrum of feminist justice. Now, were these people in India all feminists? No, I don't think they would call themselves that. I don't think they know what feminism is. I would not describe them as feminists, and yet they are on the spectrum of operations, which feeds feminism all over the world. Rape hysteria is a feminist operation that feeds feminism. Whether the participants call themselves feminists or not, or know what feminism is or not, it all feeds into the same cultural organism. To put that briefly, every anti-male stream feeds the feminist river. And oh, as long as we're talking here, let's talk about this rape culture thing. I guess this is rape culture. What happened in Dimapur, India? Um, the lynching of this man who was accused of rape. That's rape culture. That is a society that tolerates rape, that thinks rape is okay, nothing to get worried about. No, they don't care about rape. They just go beat to death anybody who's accused of rape and never think twice and never ask questions. He was accused of rape, beat the shit out of him until he dies. But no, those people are indifferent to rape. You know what? The feminist idea of rape culture is bullshit. Bullshit. I can't think of a better word for it. And we don't need to take it seriously. And if you give any credence or lend any support intellectually to that idea, there's something mentally not right with you. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to look into what's mentally not right about you. I am not the devil's proctologist, okay? Spare me, please. So anyway, I suppose we are to believe that there is a rape culture in India. And remember, what this story that we just shared, that's not the only time this sort of thing happens in India quite a bit. We are told that rape happens in India all the time, but there is a rape plague, a pandemic cultural forest fire of rape taking place in India, just as we are told that 1 in 5 women on college campuses in the USA gets raped. I am no more inclined to believe the story about India than I am to believe about the story about the debunked 1 in 5 raped college women that we hear in the USA. Both stories smell mighty fishy to me. India is way on the other side of the world. And why should we believe the stories about the rape culture in India when we can't even believe the stories that we hear close to home? You think that people who lie close to home suddenly become honest when they're talking to you from halfway around the planet? Do you think so? I don't think so. The point is that we should be very, very skeptical and take things with a grain of salt. In some cases, a barrel of rock salt would be more like it. All right. I see we're coming close to the 2 hours. It's been a great episode. I'm sorry Nick couldn't be with us. I hope that he is on the rapid road to recovery. And we're going to wrap it up now for episode number 56 of the Vanguard Report. I leave you with the same words I always leave you with. You know what we say about feminism. Feminism. Well, wait a minute. Now, before I give you that line, I'll just give you the email contact address if you want to send love mail or hate mail to us or lukewarm mail to us. It's Vanguard Report, one word, at USA.com. Vanguard Report at USA.com. That is our email address. Talk to us. Oh, and I am at Fiedelbogen on Twitter. Be my Twitter follower. And now, time to wrap it up. Remember, never forget, feminism is what we say it is. Folks, good night. Have a prosperous week, and I'll see you again next Monday for episode number 57. Ciao.